Have you ever wondered why you get along with some people and not with others? Have you wondered why there are some tasks you actually enjoy, it motivates, it stimulates your thinking, and then we get those what we call the gaga jobs, the ones that take more effort, things aren't coming together. So today, welcome to my session. It's called A Journey of Understanding Human Behavior and Whole Brain Thinking. For the purpose of this specific session, we're going to understand why it is that we connect better with some people, where other people are more of an effort. We're also going to look at exactly why some tasks stimulate you and others don't. So, first question I'd like to ask you is, are we always right? Let's think about it. And I'm sure you will agree that no, we are not always right. But yet, when we're in an argument or a disagreement with somebody, we want to force our viewpoint as if we are right. And in today's time, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's really to understand that we are different when it comes to different things and different outcomes and different ways of dealing with situations. So are we always right? And the answer is no. But does that mean we are wrong? No. We are different. We are different irrespective of age, gender, and culture. So let's explore this journey in a little bit more detail. First of all, if you think about every human being, everything starts with a thought. Your beliefs, your values, they're all part of how we think about things. And it's because of this very reason that we do find people do not necessarily always see eye to eye. In Cape Town a little while ago, I was doing a training course and we were sitting around the table having lunch. And the majority of us were talking loud, communicating, sharing different viewpoints. And across the table, there were 3 people that I sensed were not really happy with what's happening. So before I went into my afternoon training session, I approached them and asked what was wrong. And their answer was simply, we cannot believe that there's so many people in the world that don't have manners. And then I was shocked, because where did this come from? And it boils down to, they grew up thinking that when we sit at a table, there has to be peace and quiet. You have to respect people around you. The majority, which included me, that they saw as having bad manners, we grew up thinking that that was the only time that we could really communicate and share and get your message across. So the question once again is, who's right and who's wrong? And it's simply, we are different. And today we're exploring different thought processes that leads to whole brain thinking. Why? Because our thoughts, our beliefs, our values all have an effect on our words. Our words have an effect on the way people judge our attitude. For example, somebody might use a word saying, this is difficult. And it sounds, okay, well, let's leave it at there. There's no motivation. Where somebody else can take that same word and say, it's challenging. What's the difference? Challenging, the actual word, almost has more of a positive approach to saying, okay, even though it's challenging, we can do something about it. So we also need to just look at different vocabularies that are based on different thought processes. And obviously our words also affect the way we behave, our actions. Do we have mission statements? Do we have goals? Do we actually measure our actions in terms of what is the right way of communicating with different thinking preferences? So where does this all start? And if you think about our beliefs, our thoughts, our values, it all starts with what you are given at birth. 30% of when you are born becomes your foundation for future thinking as an adult and growing up. So as you can see, on the left, I have a picture of myself and 7 days old. How do I know I'm 7 days old? Because in my time, you've heard people say, in my days, I represent that generation. On the back of the photo, Mom wrote 7 days. So why am I showing a picture a photograph of myself at 7 days. Well, I had to use somebody's photo because we were all born aren't we? Have you heard the saying that good leaders are born? Have you heard the saying that is a born speaker? My question is, did they come out of a different production line? Aren't we all born? And with that in mind, we are born with 30% genes that actually is the nature part of us. You were given that. The second photo on the right, you'll see that's me a year and a half later. And as you'll notice, I didn't lose the hair is still there. The point is, how much did I learn in terms of experience from the 7-day-old to a year and a half? Plenty, which means everything that we've experienced in life molds us to believe or to think what we believe is right and wrong. And that's where the big challenge comes in. We need to understand where these different beliefs come from. And you've heard the saying, it's not just nature or nurture, because nurture is your 70% experience. It is both. So how do I understand the human behavior of my colleagues, of my family, of my friends? How do I understand what frustrates me in terms of where does it come from? So often I've found that people want to change a behavior or change the wording or vocabulary of people instead of going to understand what is the thought process behind it. So why am I showing you the photos as well? Times it where I am now in terms of my age, and you want to come to me and say, I need to change? It's not about changing people. It's about understanding where their beliefs, their thoughts, their vocabulary, their behavior comes from. And so every one of us has got a baby photo, we've got our experiences, and that's what makes this rainbow nation in South Africa so wow, is the fact that we are different. So let's go and explore these different thinking preferences that determine how we come across to other people. So every one of us has got a whole brain, the grey matter, even though sometimes we might think people don't. Have you heard people say, I work with stupid people, that's a stupid question? I'm sure we're all guilty of that. The fact is, we have the grey matter, but we have 4 thinking structures, which become our preferences or languages of the brain. And we all have all those languages, except that our combination of where our comfort zone lies, where our 30% genes and our experience lies. So we tend to have a combination of all 4, yet we have certain combinations of colors that do create a dominance, and that becomes your comfort zone, especially when you're under pressure, because that's what you know, and that's what you would believe as being correct. Unfortunately, not everybody has exactly the same combination as you. So, people that become less effort, people that are easier to communicate to, people that are easier to just understand, are people who have a similar kind of combination to you. But people that represent an opposite combination, they become the challenge. They create the frustration because you don't necessarily understand where their thought process is coming from. So let's go and have a look and see, where exactly does this come from? So in this particular session, I'm just going to give you the background as to the whole brain thinking linked to your thinking preference. In the next video, I will then explore a little bit more detail on the characteristics of each one of these thinking preferences and how to deal with it. So first of all, we need to understand it's all about understanding mental diversity, how people think. How they think is what they say and how they behave. So we're not changing vocabulary, we're not changing behavior. We're taking 10 steps back to say, where is it coming from? And once I understand where it's coming from, I can actually learn to manage it and also look at how do I approach it differently in future. Why? Because we've got so much diversity that we are dealing with, and in terms of gender, age, culture. What I love about this model And this model is called the HPDI, which stands for Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. At the end of the session, I will give you an email address if you want to do the full assessment. For now, we're going to use the model just to explain what are the thoughts that affect wording and affect the behavior. What I love about this model is that it covers culture, age, and gender. So let's get going. First of all, we need to understand we got people that we sort of look at as more thinking orientated. Their foundation, in terms of their genes, gave them a thinking basis. So what does that mean? It means they tend to make decisions and solve problems and communicate with people, not necessarily using emotion. People are not necessarily their strength. And it's not because they asked for it, that is who they are. So if we go and have a look, the first language in this whole brain thinking model is what we call the blue thinker. If you think of the color blue, is blue hot or is it cold? And I'm sure you'd agree with me, it's a cold color. Have you met people that appear cold? Direct. It's either right or it's wrong. There's no gray area. You say to them, the next door neighbors are having an argument. And they say, so what? It's their problem. But you say the next door neighbors have just bought a new car. That changes their thinking because that's their preference. Now they can analyze what job do they do, what car did they buy, what's under the hood, can they really afford it? Do you see where I'm going with this? To them, it's more about the facts of life. They like to analyze. They like to make things simple in the sense of take out the gray area, take out the emotion, and you're left with direct. A typical question that a blue thinker finds a typical question that blue finds stupid is when you ask them, am I doing a good job? They'll probably look at you very formal and say, you're still here, aren't you? At home, do you still love me? And they think it's doof. And the reason for that is they say, I still come home, what more do you want? So the important thing is, blue looks at the factual part of life, things that can analyze, things that make sense. Research, statistics, they add up. History adds up. The news on TV makes sense because it is reality. And the blue, the coldness, the directness is sometimes something that people do not necessarily understand. So often they are seen as being very negative. Why? Because they do not necessarily believe in giving the well done, the thumbs up, great job. Because simply, the fact is, according to their thinking is, you get paid to do a good job. I'll tell you if you've messed up, because that's not the deal. Okay? So, moving from the blue, the other part of the thinking preference is more thinking related, less people oriented, less emotion, is what we would refer to as the yellow thinker. Now, the yellow thinker, would everybody paint their main bedroom yellow? The bright yellow you see on the screen. And I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, yellow, not really the norm. Normally, main bedroom is pastels or earthy colors. And then you would find some people, but minority, they would say, I don't mind painting it yellow. So what does that tell us about the yellow thinker in terms of where their thinking preference comes from? They do not believe in the norm. They do not believe in following everybody else. They always like to question, why must I do this? Why must I do it your way? Why do I need to have this done at 10 o'clock? Why not 11 or 10-ish? They do not understand that things have to always be the way it's always been done. So just like painting your bedroom a bright yellow is not the norm, The same with these thinkers. They will challenge status quo. How many times have you perhaps come up with an idea and you explain it to people and they think you're from a different planet because you're too far ahead in your thinking? 3 months later, someone else implements that idea and you go, really? Where were you 3 months ago? So the problem with the yellow, or more the challenge, not problem, the challenge with the yellow is they got great ideas because they're future thinkers. They are change agents. They like to strategize. They like to push the boundaries. They like to bend the rules when necessary, because to them as we need growth. But the problem is sometimes they are 10 steps ahead of everybody else. And they need to learn, how do I communicate what's going on in my visual side of my head? How do I communicate that in a way that people will understand where I am and where I'm going with this? So the yellow also represents playfulness, especially when people are under pressure. They believe you only live once, make the most of it. And a typical comment that they would give to people who are under pressure is, stress is still going to kill you. Relax. And you know, for a certain preference, you don't tell them to relax. They do the opposite. So yellow is out there, visual idea generators, and they like to strategize. They also don't do things like normal people. And if we say normal, what is normal? And that's exactly what they'll question. They do not believe in a routine. They do not believe in step by step. And especially in today's time, they're saying, when you give me an instruction, give me the flow chart. Give me the visual. Give me the outcome, because then I can strategize my day and reach that goal. They're very goal-orientated. All right. They also have a bit of stubbornness in them. So if you push their buttons, they will push back hard. So that's the playfulness. They're also very curious, and every organization needs strong yellows to drive the future. It doesn't always make sense what they're saying, but you've got to listen to them without saying, yes, but it can't work. Yes, but it's never happened before. Sometimes it takes time to listen to yellows because they are ahead in their thinking, and say, how do we now go and put it into bite-sized chunks in order to get the job done. You will notice I did not put a yellow cap on, because yellows are also forgetful. They don't know where the cap is. So have you met people that sometimes you remind them and you remind them, and suddenly at the last minute you remind them and they're so surprised. It's almost like, is it today? Why? Because they like adrenaline. They like last minute. So the point is that you really got to understand that their timing is not your timing necessarily. All right. So going from that extreme, thinking 10 steps ahead, strategizing, we go to the bottom part of the brain in terms of the thinking structures. And there we find what we call the feelings-based. And feelers are sometimes people that take on too much. They are more people-orientated by nature. They love the energy of people, but it's also the people aspect that can frustrate them at times. Sometimes they take on too much, where your thinkers, in terms of your blue and your yellow, they can detach. They can often say, no, I'm not going to do it. And they can get away with it because it's their comfort zone and it's the way they come across. Where feelers sometimes can't easily say no. And they need to really look at, how do I say no, but in a tactful manner? How do I avoid people from dumping things on me and getting my blood pressure sky high? And in the next module, I will be explaining how you actually do that. So, if we have a look at green, green thinkers, if you look at the color green, means growth. Nature is green, it's growth. Those are kind of people that if you look at one season into the next season, it's very much consistent, almost a given. And those are people that love consistency. They love a routine. They wake up every morning and they have a routine. Get up, switch on the kettle, do this, do that. So a green is really, there's two things that are non-negotiable for them, and that is time and routine, or rules, policies, or procedures. So even waking up in the morning is a job, and that's why they refer to our job people. Why? Because they get things going. They like to be organized, they like to be planned, they like to meet deadlines, and they really get frustrated, and that's where the feeling base comes in. They get frustrated when things don't go according to plan. They get frustrated when people are not meeting deadlines. So my question is, you've just heard in terms of the yellow thinker, future, strategizing. Now you listen to the green. The question is, would they clash? And I think you can agree, they would, if we don't understand where their thought process comes from. But if we work together, we can be good for each other. We'll get better end results. Watch out for the next module. So the green is really anything to do with the way we've always done it. They're also more of a safekeeping kind of thinker, which means we'd rather do it the way we've always done it because it works. It's safe. Why do you think I haven't got a green cap on my head right now? Because they've put it in a safe place. Everything has to have a place. So if everything has a place, you do not move it, you don't take it. And if you do take it, you put it back. Otherwise, you're gonna see the emotion, the frustration rising. Green also doesn't like it when people cut corners. They also don't like it when people take risks because they're not risk takers. So often green thinkers will take work out of people's hand and say, in future, I'd rather do it myself because it gets done properly and on time. Now you know why the greens need to learn that sometimes it is a good thing to say no in a tactful manner. Otherwise, they could easily be misused. Why? Because they're so reliable. They'll even work through the night to get things done if they've committed themselves to doing it. They're also the kind of people that say, if I'm not going to do a good job, I won't even start it. I want to start and I want to complete because they have this checklist nature. Everything that gets ticked off is a sense of achievement. So often what happens is the green thinkers snoopavise your yellow thinkers. And yes, you heard me correctly, snoopavise. Why? Because green wants things done now, and what does yellow say? I'll do it just now. Or green says the deadline is 10 o'clock, and yellow say, well, why not 10-ish? So green really needs to understand that their frustrations will come from people that don't necessarily have the same standards, the same outlook in terms of getting a job done. And green also needs to realize not everything in life is a job. Sometimes we need to go and look and say, if we can do things differently but still get to the same outcome, maybe that's an option. And that's where they actually find it as a challenge. Because often my way is the safer way, the best way. What's great about them, you give them something to do, it'll be done. Ticked off and done. So the last color that we are looking at in terms of thinking preference is the red. Now, if you look at red, you look at people, you look at social, you look at fun, you look at Valentine's Day, they're more informal in the workplace, they're more people-orientated, they're the ones that personalize relationships. Red means care, red means happy, red means let's live together in one big happy rainbow nation. Red is, let's support one another. So the red, they even give you nicknames because it's a personal approach. Reds are the ones that often say there are three things that are not negotiable. Number one, because I'm a human being and not just a number, you greet me. And if you don't greet me, I'm going to educate you. And I'm going to say, well, good morning to you too. And that often happens with blues. Blues are there to make money, to get results. Blue says, the fact is, this is not a charity situation. So red is saying, yes, we know we need to get results, but hey, we've got to look at people. We've got to make sure that our people are motivated, our people are on board. So often the reds get frustrated with the blues because blue does not necessarily see the gray area of what is the emotion in a situation, where red is very much the gray area orientated. So often blue will say, we see each other every day. Why do I have to greet you every day? Once a week could be enough. Have you actually experienced that? And what red doesn't realize is that blue is very factual, to the point, and they think they're doing you a favor by cutting out all the personal stuff and getting to the point. So once again, would blues and red thinkers clash? Big time, if we don't understand each other. But once again, if we understand each other and work together, we can be good for each other. Because blue is a good problem solver based on facts. Red is a good problem solver based on people. Now, can you imagine comparing those, putting those together and looking at both sides of the preferences and meeting each other halfway? Wouldn't that be awesome? So, red is really the people that they like to work within a team. They are team players. Even to go and have a coffee, they'll say, come with me, I'm going to have a coffee, because we're in this together. The person might say, I don't drink coffee. They say, it doesn't matter. Let's just go together. All right. So the red is really that keeps families together, businesses together, teams together, because by nature, they want people to be happy and well cared for. But remember, red can also be danger. And the danger that we're talking about red is they forgive, but they don't necessarily forget. So what they do is they're often seen as weak in the beginning because they give people chances. Chances to say, you know what, let's give people the benefit of the doubt. But once those chances run out, they can literally blow up like a pressure cooker losing its lid. The built-up emotion can really, it just explodes. And this red that's normally good, nice, happy, friendly, helpful, turns into that absolute danger. And that's what we need to do with the reds, is to say, if you approach them in the correct manner, because the first thing, as I mentioned, they say is not negotiable, is to greet me. Greet me because I have feelings. I'm a human being. The second thing that red says, when you ask me to do something, the word please plays a big role. And when I've done something, the word thank you. Now, if you think about it, those three things are fairly simple, but that's what red says. Treat me in that manner, and I will treat you the same way. Forget to say those things. I'm going to try and educate you. And if you cannot get on board with what I believe as a red, I'm going to start building up my pressure cooker. So often reds build up and blues don't notice it because they can cut off from the rest of the world when they're in the analytical mind. And when red explodes, blue says, well, what just happened? So we really need to understand that there's a strength in every one of the colors, yet there is also the opposite colors that could clash. And the whole idea is to realize these things exist. It exists in you, it exists in me, irrespective of age, gender, and culture. Looking back to the blue, often I find people say, oh, that must be a male thing. Because society has taught us that males don't have a heart. It's bubble wrapped somewhere. Cowboys don't cry, especially not in front of the horses. So with that kind of generalization, when a woman has a strong blue thinking preference, a lot of people frown upon that because by nature we've been conditioned to think otherwise. And we find a lot of women that have strong blue. So if you go to a male that is strong blue and you say, I've got a headache, what's blue going to say? Take a damn pill, what's wrong with you? So now you do the same with a female that's strong blue. What's she going to say? Exactly the same thing. Why? Because every color has its own belief, its own wording, and its own action, behavior. So we cannot generalize and say all men are blue, and the same thing with the red. A lot of people generalize and say, oh, feelings-based, oh, it's a woman's thing. No, it is an individual thing, because even males have, if that's their nature, their genes that they were given as a foundation, they socialize, they interact, they're supportive, they're team players. So once again, we cannot go and generalize and say it's a male or female thing, it's a cultural thing, or it's an age thing. To conclude this section of the 4 colors, let me remind you what I said in the beginning. Basically, this model tells us what is your thinking preference, what is the mental diversity that you're dealing with, irrespective of age, gender, and culture. So, you're probably sitting there saying, so why is this important? Why should I know this, and why should I explore it in more detail? Well, these preferences tell us what is the impact. What is our dominance on how each one sees the world? Can you imagine putting people with different strengths of different thinking preference together in a project, in a team? Will there be conflict? Big time. Why? Because every color has its own question, has its own vocabulary, has its own knowledge, its own viewpoint. But wouldn't it be amazing if we can get those diversities to work together? Can you imagine the whole brain effect, the outcome? Much better. Why? Because nobody said conflict is bad or disagreeing is bad. It's how we deal with it, how we understand. Where does that disagreement come from? And how do I manage it? Some companies, based on my experience, have actually commented to me and say, you know what, we find it much easier just to put people with similar preferences together. Why? Because there's less conflict. The point is, if we put people together, they think the same, they're going to come up with the same end result. Now, how does that lead to future learning or future development? So as you read what I have on the screen, let me give you the answer. So how do I use this? Situationally, step in or stretch into those modes or those preferences or those areas you least prefer as and when required. It's not about changing who you are. It's number one, understand this exists, irrespective of age, gender, culture. Number two, to go and have a look and say, what is my personal preference? What's my combination? How do I view the world? And number three, to say, how do I read clues in others to know how to address them and approach them in the correct manner? So if you would like to complete the full assessment, the HPDI assessment, you can contact me at, email me at hpd03@telcomsa.net. And just to give you an idea of what the kind of result will look like. This is just taken from a John Doe, where you can see on the left, it gives you your overall picture in terms of where's your combination, where's your stretch, where's your strengths. On the right, the result will show what are the specific skills and competencies that you would be good at. As a leader of a team, this is very helpful, because this could give you an idea of, Are we delegating to the right people? Am I approaching people in the right manner? Am I including the right people when it comes to decision making and problem solving? So please contact me if you'd like to do the full assessment. So I hope that you've enjoyed this session, and I really hope that I'm going to see you in the next module. And the next module is really based on how do I now explore these 4 different thinking preferences in terms of strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately, how do I approach people in the different colors or the different languages. So please look out for module 2, looking at managing the whole brain thinking.